What happens when a brave 7-year-old, a lemonade stand, and Clint Eastwood cross paths? It's a story you'll never forget. The summer heat hung heavy in the air, making the pavement shimmer and sending neighbors searching for shade. On a quiet suburban street in Santa Clarita, California, life moved at a leisurely pace. Lawns were neatly trimmed, sprinklers clicked rhythmically, and the scent of freshly cut grass blended with the faint aroma of barbecue from a few houses down. But for 7-year-old Emma, this wasn't just another summer day. Sitting on a small wooden stool, her feet barely touching the ground, she carefully arranged her lemonade stand. It was a simple setup, a folding table draped with a faded checkered cloth, a pitcher of lemonade sweating in the heat, and a neat stack of plastic cups on one side. The highlight was her homemade sign, vibrant with bold, uneven letters that read, "Lemonade for Hope." Emma's determination shone through every detail, from adjusting the sign to make sure it caught the attention of passing cars, to the bright, welcoming smile she offered to anyone who looked her way. But what made her stand truly special was her purpose. Unlike other kids raising money for toys or trips, Emma had a far more urgent goal. She was raising funds for her own chemotherapy treatments. It wasn't a choice any child should have to make, but Emma had faced more in her 7 years than most people do in a lifetime. Diagnosed with leukemia nearly a year ago, she had endured endless days in hospitals filled with tests, needles, and treatments that left her weak and nauseous. Despite it all, she refused to let her illness dampen her spirit. Her mother, Claire, watched from the porch, her heart heavy with both pride and sorrow. Emma's once long, golden hair was now cropped short, a visible reminder of the toll her treatments had taken, yet there she was, waving enthusiastically at every passerby, her big brown eyes sparkling with a determination well beyond her years. A jogger passed by, glancing curiously at the stand before offering a quick wave and continuing on. A car slowed briefly, then drove off, but Emma didn't seem to mind. She adjusted her sign, poured herself a small cup of lemonade, and waited patiently. Her first customer was their neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, who shuffled over with her cane and asked warmly, "How much for a cup, sweetheart?" "$1, Emma replied with a big grin. Mrs. Henderson handed her a $10 bill and said, "Keep the change." She spoke softly, her eyes lingering on the words "Lemonade for Hope," then patted Emma's hand gently before heading back home. Little by little, more neighbors stopped by, some bought lemonade, while others simply dropped a few coins or bills into the mason jar labeled donations. Each interaction brought Emma fresh encouragement, but as the day wore on, it became clear that her goal was still far from being met. Even so, Emma remained undeterred, unaware that this very day was about to change her life forever. Someone extraordinary was about to walk into her world and transform her small stand into a symbol of hope. Emma's journey had begun in the most unexpected way. She had always been the picture of health, a lively, carefree girl who spent her days running barefoot in the yard, climbing trees, and riding her pink bike with tassels fluttering from the handlebars. She was the kind of child whose laughter filled every room, her boundless imagination bringing whimsical scenes to life on scraps of paper she loved to paint. But about a year ago, her life took a sudden turn. It started subtly, too tired to finish bike rides, frequent naps after school, and small bruises that seemed to appear without explanation. At first, her parents dismissed it as a phase. "She's probably just growing," her dad, Brian, had said, though Claire couldn't shake the growing knot of worry in her chest. Then the fevers began, low-grade at first, but quickly spiking higher and refusing to break. Emma's appetite faded, and she started losing weight at an alarming rate. One day, Claire noticed Emma struggling to lift her art supplies, her once energetic little girl now too weak to hold a paintbrush for more than a few minutes. That's when Claire knew something was deeply wrong. Hoping for reassurance but bracing for the worst, Claire and Brian took Emma to the pediatrician. The waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic, and the cheerful posters on the walls did little to calm Claire's rising anxiety. After a whirlwind of tests, blood draws, and an agonizing wait, the doctor finally entered the room, his expression confirming their worst fears. "Emma has leukemia," he said gently, as though soft words could dull the impact. Claire's world seemed to tilt as the word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. She reached for Brian's hand, her mind spinning with questions and fears. What did this mean for Emma? How bad was it? Could they afford the treatments? Emma didn't fully understand the seriousness of her diagnosis at first, but she knew something was wrong. Her parents explained it in simple terms, assuring her they would do everything to make her better. As weeks turned into months, reality began to sink in. The hospital became her second home, and the nurses became familiar faces. She endured round after round of chemotherapy, the harsh treatments taking a toll on her small body. Through it all, Claire stayed by her side, holding her hand during the worst moments and whispering reassurances as Emma cried from the pain. Meanwhile, Brian worked longer hours to cover the mounting medical bills, the stress visible on his face even as he tried to stay strong for his family. Yet, despite everything, Emma never lost her spark. She found joy in the little things, a nurse with a knack for silly jokes, a coloring book from a kind visitor, or the comforting weight of her favorite blanket. One evening, as she sat cross-legged on the living room floor coloring while her parents talked quietly in the kitchen, she looked up at her mom and asked, "What if I did something to help?" Claire knelt beside her, gently brushing a strand of hair, what little was left, off her forehead. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" she asked softly. "What if I sold lemonade?" Emma asked, her voice filled with a hopeful innocence only a child could have. "People like lemonade. Maybe they'll buy it to help me." Claire's throat tightened, the simplicity of Emma's idea of both heartbreaking and beautiful. Pulling her daughter into a hug, her voice broke as she said, "That's a wonderful idea, honey. We'll make it happen." The next day, they got to work. Emma sketched a design for her sign while Claire gathered supplies. The bright colors and bold letters reflected Emma's determination, a spark that shone despite the pain she faced daily. She poured her heart into every detail, believing with all her might that her small act could create a big difference. Little did she know, her lemonade stand would not only help her, but also unite her community in ways no one could have imagined. The following Saturday morning, Emma's dream came to life. As the sun rose early, casting long shadows over the neighborhood, Claire helped Emma set up the stand in the driveway, turning a simple idea into a symbol of hope. Emma wore her favorite yellow sundress, insisting it matched her lemonade, and a floppy straw hat shaded her face. Though the treatments had left her pale and tired, her excitement brought a rosy glow to her cheeks. She and Claire carried out the folding table, covering it with a checkered cloth Claire had found in storage. In the center stood a pitcher of lemonade, freshly made that morning with the perfect balance of sugar and lemons, condensation already forming on the glass. Beside it sat a neat stack of plastic cups and a mason jar labeled donations, the words written in Emma's shaky but determined handwriting. The sign was Emma's favorite part. She had worked on it all week, carefully using markers and crayons to write "Lemonade for Hope" in bold, colorful letters. Beneath the words, she had drawn a bright yellow sun and a red heart, simple, childlike, and bursting with emotion. They propped it up on an old easel, making sure it was visible to anyone passing by. The first hour was quiet. A jogger passed by, offering Emma a friendly wave but not stopping, and a car slowed down to glance at the stand before driving on. Emma, undeterred, adjusted her hat and poured herself a small cup of lemonade, sipping carefully as she waited. By mid-morning, her first customer arrived, Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman from 2 houses down. Mrs. Henderson shuffled toward the stand, her cane tapping softly against the pavement. "Good morning, Emma," she said warmly. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson," Emma replied, her face lighting up. "Would you like some lemonade? It's $1 a cup." Mrs. Henderson smiled and pulled a $10 bill from her purse. "I'd love some, sweetheart. Keep the change, okay?" Emma handed her a cup, her small hands trembling slightly. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. As Mrs. Henderson walked away, more neighbors began to arrive. A young mom pushing a stroller stopped to buy a cup, followed by a group of kids from Emma's school who dragged their parents along. They brought energy and laughter to the stand, chatting excitedly as they bought lemonade and asked Emma about her sign. "It's for my chemo," Emma explained simply. Her honesty was disarming, and more often than not, customers would slip an extra bill into the donation jar, touched by her courage. By noon, word had spread. Cars began to pull over, and drivers stepped out to buy lemonade and chat with Claire, who now sat nearby in a lawn chair. The smell of freshly cut grass and the sound of children's laughter filled the air, but all eyes were on Emma's stand. The highlight of her day came when Mr. Alvarez, the neighborhood mailman, arrived. Mr. Alvarez, the neighborhood mailman, was a familiar face, always quick with a joke or a kind word. That day, he approached the stand with his usual cheerful grin. "How much for a cup, Emma?" he asked, already pulling out his wallet. "It's $1, Emma replied, carefully pouring a cup and handing it to him. Mr. Alvarez took a dramatic sip, smacked his lips, and said, "This is the best lemonade I've ever had. Here's $20. Keep up the good work, kiddo." Emma giggled, her spirits soaring. For the first time in months, she felt like more than a girl battling an illness. She was making a difference, one cup of lemonade at a time. The crowd grew steadily throughout the day, and by mid-afternoon, the donation jar was almost full. Claire couldn't hold back her emotions as she watched Emma confidently interact with neighbors and strangers alike, her smile growing brighter with every kind word and gesture. The day felt like a triumph, but Emma couldn't have imagined what was about to happen next. Someone unexpected was about to arrive, and they would change everything. The sun was high in the sky, casting sharp shadows over the neighborhood as Emma poured another cup of lemonade. The donation jar, nearly overflowing, gleamed in the afternoon light, a mix of crumpled bills and loose change sparkling like tiny treasures. The air buzzed with quiet energy as neighbors came and went, each adding their own contribution to Emma's cause. Despite the heat, Emma remained unfazed, her determination shining through as brightly as the sun overhead. She adjusted her straw hat, her small hands gripping the pitcher tightly as she served another customer. Claire watched proudly from her lawn chair, chatting with a neighbor but keeping an eye on her daughter. Then, from down the street, someone caught Emma's attention. A tall man, dressed in a weathered leather jacket and dark jeans, was walking slowly toward the stand. His movements were deliberate, his posture relaxed yet purposeful. With sunglasses shielding his eyes and his grizzled face partially hidden by shadow, he exuded a quiet confidence that turned a few heads. Emma squinted in his direction, her curiosity piqued. The man wasn't familiar, he wasn't one of the regular joggers or neighbors who often passed by. He stopped a few feet from the stand, scanning the setup with a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Hi there," Emma said brightly, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the street. "Would you like some lemonade? It's only $1 a cup." The man crouched slightly, resting his hands on his knees to meet her gaze. $1, huh? Seems like a bargain, he said, his voice deep and gravelly, carrying the weight of someone who'd lived a lot of life. "What's all this for?" Emma pointed to her sign, her small finger brushing over the colorful words, "Lemonade for Hope." "It's for my chemo," Emma explained simply, her tone matter-of-fact but laced with quiet strength. "I'm trying to help my mom and dad so they don't have to worry so much." The man's expression softened. He glanced at the donation jar, then back at Emma. For a moment, he seemed to hesitate, as if weighing his next move. Finally, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, his pen poised over the paper. "Emma," she replied, blinking up at him. "Well, Emma," he said, scribbling something onto the check. "I think it's time this lemonade stand got the recognition it deserves." He tore the check from the book and handed it to her. Emma unfolded the slip of paper, her small hands trembling slightly as she read the number written on it. Her eyes widened, and her mouth fell open. This is $50,000, she exclaimed, her voice barely above a whisper. Claire, who had been watching from a distance, bolted to her feet. $50,000, she repeated, her voice trembling as she rushed to Emma's side. She glanced at the man, her eyes brimming with tears. I don't even know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. The man smiled, his rugged features softening. You've already said it, he replied. This little girl here, she's the one doing the real work. That's when someone in the crowd whispered, wait a minute, is that Clint Eastwood? The name spread quickly, sparking a wave of excitement through the crowd. Phones appeared, whispers turned into gasps, and everyone leaned in for a better look. Emma, curious, tilted her head and asked, are you famous or something? Clint chuckled, bending down to meet her gaze. A little bit, he replied with a playful tone, but not as famous as you're going to be, Emma. The crowd chuckled softly, the tension melting into a warm, genuine moment. Clint smiled and gently patted Emma's shoulder. You keep doing what you're doing, kiddo. The world could use more people like you. With the donation jar full and the check written, the encounter was far from over. What Clint had done was just the beginning of the lasting impact he would leave. The energy in the air buzzed as the realization hit. Clint Eastwood, the legendary actor and filmmaker, was standing at Emma's lemonade stand. The crowd buzzed with excitement, and people eagerly whispered to each other. Some began snapping photos or recording videos, capturing the moment that would soon go viral. Yet Clint seemed completely unfazed, his attention focused entirely on Emma and her family. Emma stared down at the check in her hands, the bold number printed on it almost too overwhelming to comprehend. $50,000, she murmured, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and awe. Claire crouched beside her daughter, her hands shaking as she gently took the check to verify what her eyes were already telling her. Her breath hitched, and tears streamed down her face. This is incredible, she said, her voice breaking. I can't believe this. Clint smiled softly, his weathered face radiating a quiet kindness. It's not about the money, he said, his tone steady. It's about showing this little warrior that she's not alone. She's already done the hard part. She just needed a little push. As if on cue, the crowd broke into applause. Neighbors who had come to buy lemonade began stepping forward, inspired by the gesture they had just witnessed. Mr. Alvarez, the cheerful mailman, was the first to speak up. Emma, he said, pulling a $50 bill from his wallet. I think Clint's got the right idea, Mr. Alvarez said. Let's make sure you get everything you need. The domino effect was immediate. One by one, people reached into their pockets and purses, pulling out whatever they could spare. Some handed over $20 bills, others dropped crumpled 5s and 1s into the already full donation jar. A few even offered checks of their own, written on the spot. Emma's stand, which had started the day with a modest goal, now felt like the center of something extraordinary. Claire could hardly keep up, tears spilling freely as she thanked each person who stepped forward. Emma, meanwhile, stood behind her lemonade table, her face glowing with gratitude and a bit of wonder. Does this mean I don't have to sell lemonade anymore? Emma asked with a shy giggle, her gaze darting back to Clint. He chuckled, the deep timbre of his laughter carrying over the crowd. You don't have to, kid, he said, crouching to meet her eyes again. But something tells me you're going to keep finding ways to make the world a little brighter. It's just who you are. The moment was electric, charged with the kind of hope that feels rare and precious. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Group photo," and within minutes, neighbors were huddled together, smiling broadly with Emma and Clint at the center. The picture, snapped by a local photographer, would later go viral, becoming a symbol of how a single act of kindness can inspire an entire community. By the end of the day, Emma's lemonade stand had transformed into something far greater than she had ever imagined. The total donations had surpassed $10,000 in cash, not including Clint's check. Emma's modest lemonade stand had transformed into a beacon of generosity, drawing out the best in everyone who stopped by. But Clint wasn't done. As the crowd began to disperse, he leaned in close to Claire and said quietly, "I've got some friends who'd like to help out too. Don't be surprised if you hear from them in the next few days." Claire, still overwhelmed, nodded, her voice catching as she replied, "Thank you. You've changed our lives." Clint tipped an imaginary hat to her and stood, addressing the small crowd that was still lingering. "You've got a special little girl here," he said. "Take care of her and keep taking care of each other." With that, he turned and walked away, his leather jacket catching the late afternoon sunlight as he disappeared down the street. The neighborhood watched him go, the weight of what had just happened settling into their hearts. But the story wasn't over. The impact of Clint's generosity and the chain reaction it sparked was about to ripple far beyond this little suburban street. In the days following Clint Eastwood's unexpected visit, Emma's lemonade stand became the talk of Santa Clarita, and soon, the entire country. Photos and videos of the encounter, taken by neighbors and shared on social media, quickly went viral. News outlets picked up the story, spreading Emma's message of hope and the power of kindness to an even wider audience. News outlets quickly picked up the story, with headlines praising the little girl with big dreams and Clint's generous act. The image of Emma standing proudly in front of her lemonade stand, holding her bright sign and wearing her radiant smile, melted hearts everywhere. At first, Claire and Brian were overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Strangers started showing up at their door with donations, flowers, and cards for Emma. The family's mailbox overflowed with envelopes, many containing checks and letters of encouragement. One handwritten note, sent from a little boy in Kansas, read, "Dear Emma, I saw your story and wanted to help. I don't have a lot of money, but I hope this $2 makes a difference. You're so brave. Love, Charlie, age 8." Emma was deeply touched. She carefully placed the letter in a shoebox she'd started filling with all the cards and notes she had received, insisting to her mom that they keep every single one. "These people are helping me," she said one evening as she stacked the letters. "I want to remember them." But the story didn't just inspire individuals, it caught the attention of local businesses and charities. A nearby hospital reached out, offering to cover any remaining medical costs Emma's family might face. A popular lemonade brand sent her a year's supply of their product, along with a heartfelt note. "Emma, your bravery reminds us of the sweetness of life. Keep inspiring the world." Claire and Brian watched in awe as their once overwhelming burden began to lift. The hospital bills that had loomed over their lives like a storm cloud were suddenly being paid off, piece by piece, thanks to the generosity of strangers. But it wasn't just financial support. Offers to help with meals, transportation, and even childcare poured in from the community. The ripple effect of Clint's act of kindness extended far beyond their little neighborhood. Inspired by Emma's story, other children began setting up their own lemonade stands, donating the proceeds to local hospitals and cancer charities. A movement began to take shape, with the hashtag #HardLemonadeForHope trending on social media. Stories poured in from across the country, kids raising money for loved ones, communities coming together, and even celebrities stepping forward to make donations in Emma's name. Despite all the attention, Emma remained humble. One evening, as she sat on the living room floor with her parents organizing another pile of letters, she quietly reflected on how much her small idea had sparked something bigger than she could ever have imagined. She looked up and asked, "Do you think we can help other kids like me? Maybe we can do something bigger." Her words sparked an idea. With the extra funds they had raised, Claire and Brian helped Emma start the Lemonade for Hope Foundation, an initiative dedicated to supporting families struggling with the costs of medical treatments. The foundation's mission was simple: no child should have to choose between fighting for their life and worrying about how to pay for it. The foundation launched quietly, but it didn't stay quiet for long. Within weeks, donations began pouring in from all over the world. Schools organized lemonade stand fundraisers, businesses pledged matching donations, and other communities took inspiration from Emma's story to start their own local efforts. One day, Emma received a package from Clint Eastwood himself. Inside was a framed photo of the two of them at her lemonade stand, along with a handwritten note: "Keep fighting, kid. You're making the world a better place." Emma's eyes sparkled as she read the note aloud, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling in her chest. "I want to make him proud," she said softly, clutching the note to her heart. What had started as a simple lemonade stand had blossomed into a movement, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness can grow into something extraordinary. But for Emma and her family, the journey wasn't just about the generosity they had received, it was about the new hope they could now give to others. Months after that unforgettable day, life looked a little different for Emma and her family. The once constant worry etched on Claire and Brian's faces had softened, replaced by a sense of relief they hadn't felt in over a year. The overwhelming medical bills were no longer hanging over them. A shadow that once hung over them had lifted, thanks to the generosity of neighbors, strangers, and one iconic actor who had stepped forward when they needed it most. Emma's health, still a work in progress, was improving. Her treatments continued, but with the financial burden eased, the family could focus on supporting her emotionally and physically. Emma's spirit remained as bright as ever, and her lemonade stand became a cherished memory not only for their family but for everyone who had been part of that remarkable day. But the story didn't end there. Emma's foundation, Lemonade for Hope, grew faster than anyone had anticipated. What had started as a small gesture of giving back blossomed into a national movement. Schools across the country hosted lemonade fundraisers and taught kids about the power of kindness. Companies pledged matching donations, and families who had once struggled with medical expenses began receiving help from Emma's initiative. The little girl who had once sat on a stool in her driveway was now an inspiration to thousands, a symbol of resilience and compassion. She proved that even the smallest voices could create echoes that reach far and wide. One day, during a local event celebrating the foundation's success, Emma stood on a small stage, clutching a microphone with hands still a little shaky but full of confidence. The crowd, a mix of neighbors, volunteers, and supporters, watched as she took a deep breath and began to speak. "Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice clear and steady despite her young age. "When I started my lemonade stand, I just wanted to help my mom and dad. I didn't think so many people would care, but you did, and now we can help other kids like me. So thank you for believing in me." The applause was thunderous as Emma stepped back from the microphone, and Claire hugged her tightly, whispering, "You've made me so proud." At the back of the crowd, unnoticed by most, Clint Eastwood stood casually in a jacket and baseball cap, watching with a small smile, there to quietly celebrate the little girl who had turned a simple act of generosity into a force for change. After the event, a reporter asked Emma what she had learned, and her words, "I learned that it doesn't matter how big or small you are, you can always do something to help. And when people help each other, amazing things can happen," became a rallying cry for the foundation, inspiring kids everywhere to start their own acts of kindness. From bake sales to car washes, children all over were making the world brighter, and Emma's story kept inspiring others. The family never forgot the moment that changed their lives, the day Clint stopped at their lemonade stand and saw the heart behind the simple sign. Emma's journey reminded everyone that even in the darkest times, kindness and hope can light the way forward. If this story moved you, take a moment to think about how you can make a difference, share it, and remember that every act of kindness, big or small, can ripple out in ways you might never imagine. If you'd like to hear more stories like Emma's, subscribe for more tales of hope, courage, and humanity.